so much, Monica. It's 7:08. Let's continue to discuss what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. And, of course, we really want to break down the grand jury's decision and the fury that's happening in Ferguson. Joining us now is Kirsten Foy of the National Action Network, former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher, and civil rights attorney Eric Subin. Thank you all for joining us on the couch. And let's talk about the grand jury, a very unique role. And we saw the legal process in action. Do you feel, and I'm going to start with you, do you feel that they did the right thing?
Well, I don't know how much of the legal process we saw. We saw a jury process, or we had a district attorney explain a process that it was unusual to most, and we had a conclusion that shocked many. And so I do not think it was a correct decision to make. Clearly, there was enough to indict this officer and answer the question of guilt or innocence in a courtroom. But this jury, this grand jury, was not led appropriately.
Eric, this I know is not the final word. The feds are talking about, Justice Department is talking about perhaps pursuing something. But as far as, aside from that, is this the final word?
This is the final word. Yeah, the grand jury did not indict. I mean, in this case, it was sort of a unique grand jury proceeding because the grand jury in this case, first of all, there's 12 people in this Missouri grand jury as opposed to 23 like you would have in New York, needing 12 in New York to get an indictment, whereas you would only need 9 out of the 12 in Missouri. So it's a much higher standard, even though the burden to get the indictment is so much lower as opposed to the criminal trial.
Did the prosecutor present enough evidence? I think a lot of people want to know, because 60% of Ferguson is black, 70% white, and the jury make up 6 white men, 3 white women, 2 black women, and 1 black man. They came down to this decision. So what did the prosecutors do in order for them to look at all the appropriate evidence? And will we see some of this evidence as a public?
Well, as far as grand jury proceedings go, this seems to be held in a much different manner. I mean, this seemed to be held more like a criminal trial itself, where the prosecutor, Robert McCulloch, was not just presenting inculpatory evidence, but also exculpatory evidence. I mean, this grand jury met over 3 months, once a week, and heard about 60 witnesses, and that's exclusive of documentary evidence. So he was essentially presenting both sides of the case.
We see right now some live pictures of, again, the fires burning in Ferguson this morning. That's the auto parts store, the Little Caesars, a cell phone store. I mean, a dozen fires burning this morning or smoldering this morning. We have seen the pictures of the looters out there. And Dr. Porcher, I want to turn to you because you are a former police officer. And a lot of this anger, this isn't just about Michael Brown. I mean, people think it is, but this is about a bigger issue. I was reading an interesting comment from the Congressional Black Caucus, and I think they sum it up pretty well. They say this decision seems to underscore an unwritten rule that black lives hold no value, that you may kill black men in this country without consequences or repercussions. That's from the Congressional Black Caucus putting that statement out there. As a former police officer, how do you now bridge the gap when you have people saying, you don't care about us? How do you tell the community? How do you bring this community back?
I think that this was a systemic problem that occurred in Ferguson. It wasn't just this incident. This incident was the platform that engaged the explosion of the racial tensions that are occurring in Ferguson. However, when we look back at the diversification of that police department, 53 members are white and 2 African American, that creates a problem. So when we look at past incidents that have occurred in Ferguson, that was what ignited this problem.
But isn't it almost how you look at it, the optics of this story, really? Because if you look at the breakdown of how many people live in Ferguson, 67 black, 70% white. I mean, isn't there a way for the community in itself to create a bigger role in changing policy and positivity? Because what's happening right now is not what we want to see. And also what happened in New York with the police commissioner having fake blood thrown on him, you know, for me, that leads a lot of questions to where we're going. And I think this is not where we need to head to create real change. Yes, it could be a flashpoint for us to create real change, but we need to. And what I want to know about is what Reverend Al is going to be doing today, because he's not only going to St. Louis, he's also having a press conference at 12 o'clock today as well, right?
He is on his way, as we speak, to Ferguson to be with the family, and he will be holding a press conference at noon in Ferguson, announcing the next steps in this action. But I would, if I may, you know, it's unfortunate that there was fake blood thrown on the commissioner, but what is at the heart of this is the real blood that's spilled every day. Black men,
we have a graphic. We have all the names of all the young men who have just lost their lives, not just in Ferguson. I mean, look, Akai Gurley in Brooklyn, you have Dante Parker, Eric Garner, Ezell Ford, John Crawford, Kahime Powell. All of these lives lost, unarmed black men dying. And again, that is what you hear the anger. You go out there and Michael Brown is part of what you're seeing, but it's not the whole story.
It's a national crisis.
So how do you heal this? I'm looking for the answer.
We have to start with justice. We cannot move past the injuries that have occurred and say heal. You can't heal without being treated.
Can I ask you a question? We had a grand jury that looked at evidence, that looked at testimony, that took their job very seriously in Ferguson, and they knew the job that they had to do. I think they weighed it very carefully. And for us to be able to say, you know what, you didn't do the right thing. I mean, we didn't look at all the testimony. We didn't look at all the evidence. We don't know what really happened in that. So I feel like maybe we're belittling the justice system. It is a unique role, the American justice system, and not many of us really understand the policy or the procedures that are in place.
Well, that's part of the problem. The other part of what we saw last night was the district attorney that laid out how he led that grand jury, and it was not a standard execution of a grand jury. That's exactly right. A prosecutor can get what they want out of a grand jury. There's a saying, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. If you want an indictment as a prosecutor and you go to a grand jury, you can get
Eric,
one.
you have to respond to that.
That is exactly right. It's famously said a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich if he wants. The prosecutor is putting on a one-sided show. Now, in this case, it was somewhat unique because he was presenting both sides of the case like he was putting on a full trial.
Do you believe that prosecutor led this grand jury?
Well, I mean, led in the sense that he was the one conducting the grand jury proceedings, but he was presenting seemingly both inculpatory and exculpatory evidence. I mean, both sides of the story. If he wanted to get an indictment, he could put on whatever evidence he wanted.
Right.
I think what we all can agree upon is that we need a sense of peace and we need a sense of a calm in this world, especially in Ferguson and also on the streets of New York, as a police officer, as an activist, as a legal attorney, as a civil rights attorney. That's one thing that we can all sit and agree upon this morning. There's so many layers to this story and so much frustration and so much pain. We will continue to cover it because there's layers upon layers upon layers to the story that has tentacles all the way here in New York City as we wait to find out what's going on with the Eric Garner case and the Gurley case as well.
This is a much bigger story, and again, we're staying on top of it here. We have Jay Dow. He's going to be live joining us next hour. Of course, we have another team of reporters following all of this. And by the way, if you want the latest, you can get it on TV and also online at pix11.com/Ferguson.
Time right now, 7:16. Let's take a look at your forecast.